Our interim superintendent, Dr. McKnight, to join. But hi, hello. Already seeing some faces, so I appreciate that. Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Just drop how you're doing in the chat while we wait for Dr. McKnight to get in here. Just drop it in the chat. How are you doing? How is school going? First quarter is wrapping up in a week and a half. So that's very, very exciting or scary, depending on who you are. Just share your thoughts in the chat. I want to hear how you guys are doing. Noella, thank you for being the first person to join. I appreciate it. I appreciate the timeliness. That's awesome. Okay, someone says that they're doing great. That's good to hear. I'm doing pretty good. I have a math test tomorrow. I literally have like my study guide right here that I'll be working on as soon as I'm done. All right, looks like Dr. McKnight is here. I'm going to let's see. Hello!
Good evening, Hannah. How are you?
I'm good, Dr. McKnight. How are you?
I am great. It's good to see you and great to be here this evening.
Yes, even in the middle of this storm that came out of nowhere.
I agree, but hopefully that will not deter any of our participants from joining in and engaging with us in this conversation this evening, because it may be raining outside, but we're going to have great conversation inside. So I'm looking.
I agree. We already have 100 people here with us right now, and hopefully throughout the course of tonight we'll get some more. But to begin, for our viewers who don't know, could you introduce yourself?
Sure. So good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Monifa McKnight, the interim superintendent here in Montgomery County Public Schools. I am thrilled to join you here this evening with our student member of the board, Hannah Aluni, so that we can spend some time together talking about anything that's on your mind this evening. What's important to you, any questions that you have that makes you better understand everything that's happening in MCPS, and most importantly, feel a part of the community that we are establishing here together. So thank
you. Yeah, and for, I guess, people who don't know me, I'm Hannah Aluni. I am a senior at Richard Montgomery High School, and until July 1st, 2022, I am the student member of the Board of Education. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. For the students who are watching, if you have any questions, put them in the question box below. I'll be checking that throughout tonight and elevating some questions that I see, especially the one that gets the most amount of likes. So the more likes your comments get, the more likely it will be that Dr. McKnight and I can answer them. But to begin, I know we have some pre-submitted questions, concerns from students, and one of the biggest ones, I hate to start off with a heavy topic, but one of the biggest concerns from students is a rise in hate speech, a rise in hate symbols around schools, at Walter Johnson High School, at a sporting event at Einstein High School, but really all across the county. So Dr. McKnight, do you have, can you share with us what MCPS is doing to sort of combat that, or your personal reactions?
Absolutely. So I will first begin by saying, yes, let's start with the tough questions. And this is one. And I think this whole topic just gets at an adaptive challenge that we face in our society, we face in our nation, we face in our county, and here we are now facing it in our schools. And the premise for it is clearly there being this whole notion of hate and bias, which I think just speaks to people not understanding, people working off of thoughts about things that they don't understand, and inadvertently attack them. And so I personally connect with this because, one, I was a student. I mean, this may have been some time ago, but I was a student. I grew up in South Carolina, and, you know, it was a very different place from Maryland. And so I very much was aware of racism and what that represented, and I experienced that as a student. And I mean, a part of why I'm here today and doing what I do is because I wanted to have an opportunity to impact change and make change happen as a result of my own experiences. So here I am a number of years later, and we're having the same conversation. So I am concerned about it, frustrated, and it's absolutely something that I know is within our control to change. But I also know that it's going to take everyone's input and dedication to say this is something that we all have to work on and address. And let's talk about that for a moment. So, this summer, I spent some time with students who were at the retreat for minority scholars, and we talked about this issue of what is everyone's responsibility when it comes down to creating the environment that we all can live and thrive in. And I'll first start with, when our students are in these places and you see someone saying or doing something that is not appropriate, we have to hold each other accountable. And I don't mean hold each other accountable in ways that means we're fighting and we are doing things that cause more disruption, but we address it. And I think it's really important for us to have that capacity that is built within ourselves and with our organizations to say, when we see people saying and doing things, how do we proactively address it and say, this is not okay? We know we had the incident happen at one of our high schools in which, students said, students felt attacked and the statements were made that made them feel less than. So what was everyone's responsibility at that point? So every student who was there and observed it, saw it, who did it? First identifying, who were the people that were addressing our environment, because I think that allows us to be as intentional as we can with, one, we need to address it, figure out who it is, and then determine, well, what needs to be done for you to understand that this is not okay? And most importantly, if it's not okay, why are you doing it? Because I think it gets to the root of that misunderstanding. Do you have some biased beliefs about a group of people that you shouldn't have, but you don't know that you shouldn't have those beliefs? Let's unpack that and figure out what that is and be open to having those discussions. Our history just speaks about, quite frankly, a lack of education and ignorance, adding to us not knowing how to communicate effectively with one another, whether we are talking about differences in race, gender, culture. And I feel like where we are now in 2021, there's no excuse. There's a lot of education out there. We are all in our schools together. We're in a community together. Montgomery County is one of the most diverse places we can be. So how do we take advantage of that and really get to know and understand people or cultures or races think that we just don't understand to become more and better educated? So I think that's our responsibility. There are students, I think that, the adults as well. We're right there. And so as these things happen in our schools, we again have to take it very seriously and determine, how do we correct a wrong that was done? And sometimes doing that privately is appropriate, but also making sure there's a opportunity to bring people together so that there's that shared accountability, so that we can look into the faces of those who may have, different opinions and say, how do we better understand one another and prevent this from ever happening again? So I say we cannot give up. This is an ongoing priority that we all have to work on and be open to. And there's responsibility for students, adults, parents, every single person in our community to say, how do we create the community to be one that we want to be a part of? And that is acceptable to everyone who lives in that community. And that's all of us.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah, I really love that you shared your personal connection to all of this, growing up in South Carolina in the South, and obviously being a woman of color. I know for me personally, when I was running in my election for this position, it was right when anti-Asian hate crimes were spiking through the roof, higher than we've ever seen them. And so that was something I really took to heart. And then now, being in my position, continuing to see hate speech against all people, but also specifically Asian American girls at one particular sporting event was really, really disheartening to hear. And I think accountability is really important. It's up to all of us to make sure that the perpetrators are held accountable, and that we can collaborate with students and staff and administration at every school to make sure that these things don't happen, that the root is discovered, and then we can sort of unpack that together. I know our school system as a whole is moving towards more restorative justice measures, which is really important to sort of move away from implicit biases and other historical patterns we see in punishment data. But I also think it's important to remember that even restorative justice doesn't mean that there isn't any accountability for wrongs that are done to students.
I'm so glad you said that, because oftentimes people get that part confused.
Yeah.
Restorative justice is about us restoring the harm that has been made to a community or an environment as a result of an action that someone has taken. And oftentimes that is a part of the process. But in no way, shape, or form should it take out the accountability that does have to be there for the decisions that we make. Now, I mean, again, it's just like a child when they're not understanding a hot stove and you touch it and you feel the consequence, you won't do it again, you know? And so it's that we have to hold each other accountable, learn from it, and sometimes that there are tough consequences that come with that. But I must say, this is so important because, Hannah, you have a little brother. I have a son. How old is your little brother?
He is 15.
He's 15. My son, Aiden, is 9 years old. If they have these same experiences in school for your brother within the next 3 years, for Aiden over the next 9 years, then that means that we have not done enough if they're still experiencing these very situations that we're talking about. And for me, that's just unacceptable. And so the question we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do? What do we do every day to make sure that we are actively creating the environment that we want to live in that is acceptable of everyone who lives in our community? That's our role.
Definitely. I am going to move on to another question. This one has a lot of likes, continuing with the heavy topics. Unfortunately, this student doesn't go to Seneca Valley, but they have cousins and friends who do. And they've been hearing about a lot of incidents that have happened there, a lockdown, some fights at a sporting event. And they, are hearing those stories, afraid. Students there are a little bit unnerved. What has been MCPS's response to the events that have happened at that school these past few weeks? And how can we make sure that things like that don't happen again?
Thanks, Hannah. And I want to thank our student who does not attend Seneca Valley, but have loved ones at Seneca Valley for raising that. And I thank you for raising that question, because what we have to recognize is it is okay for us to share our vulnerabilities to make sure everyone understands how some actions may be impacting a larger community than just that, in this case, that school community at Seneca Valley. You're not a student there, but I'm so thrilled that you are concerned about the environment at Seneca Valley, because that's what we should do. Be concerned about things that go beyond just our homes or our schools. So a few things that we are doing at Seneca Valley, and I will say this to you. So I was a high school student once. Here we go again, a while ago. But I will say, I do remember when I was in school, sometimes there would be these situations that would come up that got the day off task. Whether it was back then it was pulling the alarms. You all remember some of that. People pulling the fire alarm, because maybe there was a test coming up or whatever that was happening. All types of things like that happened before that I think sometimes get at intended disruption. And so what I'm going to say, and I'm hoping some of our students from Seneca Valley are on Insta tonight with us, because what I want to say is we have to take control of that. And if there is some things happening at Seneca Valley or any other school that may be just a series of events, we have to ask ourselves the question, why is this happening? And is this an intentional situation that's causing interruption? Or is it something that we all need to do better with just building relationships overall, as a student body? And I don't know. I know the school is working to address those exact questions. And here's what we're doing in MCPS to support Seneca Valley to get to the root of that. The first thing is we're having community meetings. So our schools who are experiencing these rates of fights and things that are happening that have raised to a level of concern for us, we're calling upon the community to come in and have conversations about why is this happening? Getting to my point. Is it happening, for one reason that we think, and it's a different reason that it actually is happening, but we have to ask that question. And I think we ask that question with everyone, not just the students who are in that school, but with their parents who are also concerned about it. Hey, I'm a parent. Again, if my school day is being interrupted, there are lockdowns and things that are happening that's compromising the safety and security, and I want to know what's happening. I want to be a part of that discussion. So community meetings are involving the students, the parents, and any other invested stakeholders who truly want to come and be a part of the discussion and say, how can we solve this problem together? And so that has been one that our Office of Teaching and Learning in Schools have put in place. And I know those conversations are happening with the community. And I truly believe that when we own the issue as a community and figure out what all our parts are as a parent, as a student, as an administration, as what, whatever it may be to solve the problem, that's where the power comes in. So that's the tool that we're leveraging right now with Seneca Valley and a few of our other schools that we've gotten some really good feedback on from just coming and saying, hey, we got a problem. Let's come into our school building to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that it's not just Seneca Valley, right? Like I am spending a lot of time this year visiting schools, middle and high schools, and I hear at every school coming back together in person 100% for the first time in 18 months has put a lot of stress on students, and it manifests itself in very, very different ways. But it's important to remember that when navigating relationships, I think, at school.
Very true. Hannah, one other point too, I saw a question, and I'm trying to follow the questions on Insta, but I know I can't. But I did see one point that someone made about, the lockdowns as well. Mm-hmm. So it's been 18 months since we've had everybody back in all of our schools in our community. And I will tell you, as an interim superintendent, as a parent, I am always going to make the decision. Your principals are going to make the decision to err on the side of caution if we in any way question your safety. That is because we care about you, and you are our priority at the end of the day. And so as we've opened up all of our schools this year at full capacity, there are a number of things that are happening, whether it may be things in the community, the surrounding community. It may not be when we found out later, a credible source, but we also want to be very thoughtful about how we are paying attention and taking precautions to make sure we don't take any risk. And so I know sometimes that may feel uncomfortable when we do have to go into the shelter, but I'd rather go into a shelter if the police are looking into something that's happening into the community and be confident that our schools are safe than to not take that measure and then leave us in a vulnerable situation.
Right. So. Actually, this isn't something that was part of the question, but while you were talking, it made me think. This is the first time in over a decade that our schools, have opened without police in them, without school resource officers. And I always supported police-free schools for a number of reasons. But how does that sort of play in with what we're seeing in terms of different instances at different schools?
Right. So this is our first year, as you said, coming back without having the SROs in our high schools, which is what we previously had. And for all the reasons that we've discussed publicly, we are implementing a system that does not look the same because the system particularly there were a number of things that we needed to correct and adjust and make better in that whole program. So now we do have the CEOs, the community engagement officers. And so because we don't have SROs in schools does not mean that we don't have a relationship with the police department. I do want to be very clear about that. So we do still have a relationship with the police department, and thankfully we do, because this year when we opened up and we had cars backed up down the highway miles, we had to call them so that parents could successfully navigate picking and dropping their students up from school. And in these situations in which we've had like community activity when our students are in school, we have relied on our police to go out and investigate what's going on in the community so that we can make the right decisions and make the right call for our schools to keep our students safe. And so I share those examples because those examples really speak to why it's important to continue with that relationship. Now, our community engagement officers who are now supporting the school system in a different way. They are not present in the schools. However, they have been present in other ways in terms of consulting with situations that come up. And the work group that we've established that started to work last spring that will continue to work throughout this year, the RSSSW group. And I'm not even going to
Reimagining school safety and well-being.
Yes! Honey, you win the prize. Yes.
Thank you. Gold star.
I've had too many acronyms so far in the day, but anyway,
way too many.
That group
way too many.
still convenes and will continue to convene this year to map out exactly how do we all feel the need to have the CEOs really support schools in a meaningful way or in an appropriate way based on how we define that, and not in a way that takes us back to addressing the issues that came up when we evaluated the SR program that led to it just not working.
Right.
And so
Right.
That's why the student voice in that group has been critically important. SWAG, I want to send a shout out to SWAG. I hope they're here tonight because a lot of the feedback that they've shared just elevated why student voice is always important and why it should always be included in every process that we map out within a school system. Not when there's a problem, because quite frankly, if we're engaging students along the way, then we'll identify what the problem is before it becomes a big problem. So
yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned the student voice piece. This is one of my favorite issues to highlight when I talk about, yes, students speaking up can make an impact, right? Nobody was considering getting rid of school resource officers from our schools until students of color, students with disabilities spoke up and said that this was a presence that made them very uncomfortable, made them feel unsafe in schools, and pointed out the data that frankly, many adults had overlooked for many, many years. So it took students speaking up in order to get some actual concrete changes made. So thank you for that response. Moving to a bit of a lighter topic. This is something that I have gotten literally hundreds of emails on. I'm sure you have too, Dr. McKnight. Cool math games.
I was going to say it first, Hannah. I was going to say it first.
Cool math games. Students are angry. Students are upset. Please, can you explain, if you can speak to this, the process for how different websites are reviewed and what is blocked and what is unblocked, and just speak to cool math games a little bit.
And I'm sorry, I just saw a comment where it says one person can't make a difference.
Yes.
I want to make a difference, but one person can't make a difference. Yeah, you can. I'm sorry, Hannah, I'm going to get that question in a minute, but yes, I just saw that and I'm like, yes, you can make a difference. It starts with one person, but it is, how do you then combine with others who have the same interests that you have to say, how do we work together to address a problem? And I'm telling you, every idea starts with a person, an idea in their head, and then it's their job to go and find others who have the similar ideas, similar interests, and then develop a team together to work on that. So anyway, I just had to spread that little word of encouragement as I saw that student comment, because I'm like, yes, you can. One person, that's all it takes.
And we have students show up to board meetings testifying all the time, singular students who make a world of a difference. Just the other day, we had that student who called us out, called the school system out for firing a staff member a few decades ago for being openly LGBTQ+. Something we would never do today, but it's still important to correct those historical wrongs. So one student can make a huge, huge difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so cool math games. So I wanted to say, yes, I've gotten a number of emails about cool math games, and I know that some of our students said that you've enjoyed it. You do not like the fact that it is not available. So let me back up and tell you a little bit more. So whenever we have these resources available, we have a process in which our curriculum instruction office goes and they evaluate all of the instructional resources that we make available to our students. And we did some work on cool math games. We found a few facts that I know everyone may not agree with, but there were some concerns about there's much more content on there outside of math. We also found that it is a huge marketing tool for a company, not one that we found to be very valuable, research oriented around it truly being significant in helping students improve their math skills. And right now, when we think about all of our investments that we have in the system, it's important for us to evaluate all of our programs. And again, I mean, if I polled 25 of you in one class, I may talk to 5 students, maybe 5 of you said this class, 3 of you said the class is great, 2 of you said not so much for me. And so we have to think about that same idea as we think about how we have to process our resources and really think about what's a good investment and what's not. And so unfortunately, for some of you who have shared your concerns about it, Cool Math Games was one that we did not see as one that would leverage, again, students being successful in having math improvement as a result of that. But what I can say is, because we are always concerned about and making sure that everything that we invest in is truly helping our students, our job is to find something way better than cool math games to help support your assistance in developing math skills. So that's our job. So let us do that. And again, let's say that's our role now. If cool math games wasn't it, then what is it?
I love that. We have some real talent in Montgomery County Public Schools. There are students who have created apps, who have created websites. I want to see the next student who can create the replacement cool math games that actually has math in it, you guys, because I know the site. I used to use it all the time in elementary school, and I know that there's no math on it. So
that's right.
That might make me unpopular, but I challenge you to find a replacement or create one.
And so since Hannah and I put that challenge out there, if you've created an app or you have a game that you have created that you think really gets at what we're trying to do here, supporting math for our students, then share it with us. Mm-hmm. Share it with Hannah and I, and we'll be happy to look at it. And I'll be the proudest interim superintendent to stand up and say, this is a program created by one of our very own students. That would be my dream there. So yes. That's a challenge to you all. Let's get it done.
Let's get it done. Let's get it done. All right. Another positive question. I love to see these, but you guys can ask whatever you want. This student shares that outdoor lunch has been a very positive experience for them, especially in elementary schools. And they're wondering if MCPS will keep this initiative in the future.
Absolutely. Let me say this. So we didn't just experience a pandemic to go back to doing everything the way that we did it before. I have to tell you, as we were talking about outdoor lunch, we were having so many conversations about it. One day I decided to go outside of my office and eat lunch, and it was a nice day, and it was the best thing ever. I know we talk a lot about wellness, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about that a little bit more tonight. But you know how sometimes you get on your phone, your app, it may tell you, take a deep breath, walk around, do something to get your exercise, mental energies going. Well, I think this is exactly what outdoor lunch provides us an opportunity to go outside, get exposure to fresh air, sun on nice days, and just to change up the environment a little bit. So I am, first of all, so glad to hear that you all love it and that it's working well. And I absolutely think that this is, or I know this is one of the practices that we will take moving forward post the pandemic that makes our school system and the school experience overall for you better. So please continue to let us know what other things that we've implemented this year that are different, but new and improved that we should keep. And I'm excited to hear that. Yes, outdoor lunch. Yeah, I
love it too. Just getting that vitamin D makes such a big difference. And I feel the classes I have after lunch, I just feel so much more energized and excited. And it's definitely made a difference for me. But keeping in line with changes that were made last year and this year, a question I get a lot when I visit schools is that students really liked the asynchronous Wednesday they had last year at the secondary level. They loved the C day, and now we don't have it anymore. I know why we don't have it anymore, but Dr. McNutt, could you share with our students why we had to change that schedule?
Yes. So students, I want to remind you last year was it last year? Yes, last year when we were experiencing COVID-19, we were trying to make a number of changes that were just untraditional, and we had the leverage to do it because the state of Maryland also allowed us to do it because we closed schools in March, and then again we had to reinvent how we were connecting with you all as an educational structure within 2 weeks. And so we had the latitude at that point to change our schedule, and we also knew that we had two priorities when we went to Wednesdays. One, because we figured when we would rotate different groups of students in, knowing that we couldn't have school at full capacity, we wanted to have a day to be able to come in and clean before a different group of students came into the building. That was one priority. Another priority was our teachers. So they were amazing superheroes during that time, and they came forward and had to really think about all the ways that they could engage and be involved in instruction with you virtually, when quite frankly, none of us ever had to do that before in the way that we did it. And so we wanted to provide Wednesdays as a time for them to be able to recollect themselves, the thoughts, ideas, and prepare for you as students. So what's different about this year is when the state of Maryland said that we need to come back to school in full capacity for in-person instruction, we were required to have 5 days of in-person instruction within our schools. So that then took away that flexibility that we had last year when we were experiencing COVID-19, which is very different from where we are now as we are following the state guidance. So thank you for sharing that. We're always thinking about ways to address, you know, flexibility. And I know this question came up also as a student question that I saw said, you know, this also helps me with our wellness. And I want to say your wellness is also very important to us. And I hope that you all are taking advantage of all of the resources that we have on our website and available to students in our different schools to address those wellness needs, as we know that's a priority. So
right. And I get questions like this a lot from students for things like, you know, why do we have summer at this period of time, and why can't we have Wednesdays anymore? And it all often comes back to the state. You know, for our students who are in 8th grade or 9th grade taking national, state, local government, you understand that, you know, MCPS is the local government.
Right.
We have to follow the state's rules, and the state has to follow the federal government's rules, right? So sometimes things are out of our control, but they're not out of your control, right? As students, you can send emails to the State Board of Education. They have a student member there too, Kevin. He's awesome. And you can ask them to maybe change their requirements if that's something you're interested in advocating for. But yeah, sometimes MCPS has to follow the big boss's rules.
Yes, that's true. Listen, if we could go out there and create our own rules, we'd all probably be doing some very different things. But I also recognize that the state made this decision in consideration that it had been a very long time, 18 months, since students had not had an education in which they were coming in person every day a week consistently for a very long time. And so this was an effort to get us back into a model in which students had access to the best way of learning personally with their teachers and in schools every day. And, you know, recently we had a board meeting where we looked at some of our student data, and we saw that while we did what we had to do during the pandemic, and we made lemonade out of some lemons, and we did the best we could with virtual environment, it did have an impact on student learning. We saw that, you know, some of our students, math and reading, and particularly at elementary levels, were significantly impacted. And so we do take that very seriously and want to spend that time, as much time as we can, to make sure our students have everything they need to get caught up and be successful and be college and career ready.
Yes, yes, thank you for that. So we are about halfway through our live stream. If you can believe it. I know. We're gonna just for the viewers watching, we are gonna get cut off at 8. But because we are at the half mark, Dr. McKnight doesn't know this. I'm putting this on her on the spot. I thought we would do a little halftime show, a little halftime thing. And I think the students would like to get to know you, Dr. McKnight, a little bit better. So I was wondering if you could just share one fun fact about yourself. Anything. It can be anything. A fun fact, whether it's your favorite color or something about your background in MCPS, that just helps students get to know you a little better as a halftime show.
Oh, okay. That's better than what I thought you were going to do, Hannah. I thought you were going to turn this into a game show, and I had questions about myself, so that's fine. I can handle this. So, interesting fact about me, I am the youngest of 3 sisters. I share with you, I grew up in South Carolina, and 2 things that I'll tell you my sisters have said about me is that I am strong-willed, which means that I am very focused and dedicated in the things that I believe in. And quite frankly, I say, well, clearly that's worked for me in my life, so I'm okay with that. And then they said that I need to learn how to relax better on vacation. Because when we're on vacations together, they say I don't know how to relax, which is to sit and do nothing. And quite frankly, I'm like, they don't understand. Like, there's always something to do. That's the way I see it, right? There's always something to do. There's either a new song that's out that I want to hear. So I want to make sure I see what the lyrics are. You know, there may be some book out that I heard that's great, and I want to see what it is. Or maybe I heard that somebody posted something on some social media website that I think is funny, that I want to see what it was. So yeah, and I must say recently my sister introduced me to TikTok. And so I've been enjoying that. I think that's relaxing. I think it's quite funny.
Well, next month, maybe we'll do our little Q&A on TikTok. We'll switch over to another platform. Yeah, I visited a school the other day. I think I told you this. No, I didn't tell you this. I told your chief of staff, Mr. D'Andrea. I visited a school, a middle school, and I usually share my social media because I think it's a good way for students to connect with me. And a 6th grade student, when I shared with her my Instagram, she said, "We don't use Instagram. That's for old people."
Now, I thought that's what they said about Facebook. See, I can't.
Yes.
I got to tell you, this is what's so hard about social media. I heard that Facebook was for older people, and then then it said that, you know, Twitter was out and Instagram was in. Now it's the gram. And so are we now saying that it's not Instagram? Are we on the wrong
I think
platform,
so.
Rhoda?
I think so. I think I'm showing my age by being on this platform.
Keep us updated. Tell us where we're supposed to be.
I know. Yeah, tell us, please. We'll go anywhere you want us to be. Thank you for that. I enjoyed that little halftime break. I know for me personally, my favorite things to do in just like the free moments of time I have, Squid Game on Netflix has been a recent obsession. It is an incredible show. And I'm also a very big Taylor Swift fan. So, yeah.
I did not know that, Hannah, although I've heard about, what is it, the Squid game? Yes, I've heard about that.
You have.
I need to check that out myself.
You should. You definitely should. All right. So going back to our serious set of questions, this was a pre-submitted question from a student from Ridgeview Middle School. And they are asking, what is MCPS doing to improve the daily quality of life for students at older schools?
Well, first, hi, Ridgeview Middle School student. I am the former principal of Ridgeview Middle School, so I absolutely enjoyed my time there. And interesting fact that you say it was an older school. I went there as a principal in 2011. And the school actually was being modernized because of the age of the school. So it's very interesting to hear that it's an old school because, quite frankly, that modernization opened that building up to look much newer than it did when I first visited. So, but your point is well taken. I got to say, we know that schools represent a lot for students. As a matter of fact, I'll even say when I was at Ridgeview, I remember students were so happy with the updates that were made. They commented on every new sign that was up. And what I realized is the school environment, the school building actually does mean a lot for how students feel when they're in that building. So that's why your point is well taken. And in MCPS, we do pay very close attention to that. We have a process in which we look at schools. We actually had a meeting today just to talk about our CIP process and who are our schools that we're looking at to make updates. And again, I'll say that Ridgeview had updates in 2011, but there are a number of our schools in our school system that we look at on a regular basis and determine what is the age of the infrastructure, when was the last time it was modernized, what can we do to make sure it is in fact the environment that students feel good when they're in and a school building that they're proud of. And overall, I have to say in MCPS is something that in our history, we've taken very seriously about the conditions of our schools because we know that means a lot for our students. So we continue to work on that and work through that process. And, I think I heard the example of sometimes, in some of our schools that have older classroom spaces, there may not be windows and things like that. So we do look at all of those factors when we consider upgrades into our schools. So thank you for that question.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned the meeting we had today. We're right in the middle of our capital improvements plan season, right? Today we were talking about projects that are going on at Northwood, at Kennedy, Poolsville's getting a whole new building. We're alleviating overcrowding in the Down County Consortium and at Walter Johnson High School with Woodward High School. So there's a lot happening. something I learned recently that I thought might be good to share with students is, the way we determine, or MCPS determines what schools get renovations, expansions, additions is through a formula called the Key Facilities Indicator that takes into account a bunch of different factors: when the school was built, how many people are living there, what's the projected enrollment going to be in the future, looking at birth rates and all that. And that's plugged into a formula. School names are generated, and then MCPS goes out and talks to those communities to talk about what their needs are. So it's both data-based and very personal, which I think are two important approaches to use simultaneously.
Absolutely. Hannah, I'm also seeing some comments about some students saying that in some of the schools, they ran out of desks or ran out of lunch trays. So I do encourage you all, first of all, thanks for being diligent and coming on and sharing that these are some real realities that are happening in your schools. When those things happen, please use your voice, go and speak to your administrators and tell them that this is something that you are concerned about. This is maybe an issue that you're bringing to their attention. So that it can be addressed. The last thing I want is for our students to feel like in our classrooms and in our school buildings, you don't have what you need. And sometimes it just may take a while to get that information to the right person who can do something about it. But
Right.
Again, elevating why your voices are always important. And because you are students, it doesn't mean that you can't walk up and share with an adult in the building or your principal or assistant principal, here's something that's a problem. Can you help us fix it? So that everyone can do what they need to do to address the needs.
Yeah, or even come to the Board of Education or Dr. McKnight.
Right.
We have public testimony slots at every single one of our meetings. We love to see students come out. Just today, we were talking about resolving some Americans with Disabilities Act issues at Wooten High School. And that came out of a lot of advocacy from students who attend that school who have disabilities, advocating for themselves and asking for changes. So, the school system is listening, and your voice is really, really valued here. All right, I have another question that is of great interest to our students. Will snow days exist this year and in the future? Are we going to have to go back to Zoom school on those snow days?
You all have given it a name, Zoom school.
That's me. That's not fun. That's
okay.
me.
Okay, so when we go back to snow days, if we have snow that is significant and it requires us to have to close our buildings, we will make the decision, as we always do, to evaluate the situation and determine if in fact it's going to be a hard travel day to be able to have snow days. So I want to say to you, I do not believe that snow days have gone away. Now, the question that I say is, the question that I have is, will we have snow? We haven't had snow, quite frankly, for the last couple of years. I meant to tell you all, I'm a gardener. So my annuals, my plants that are supposed to just live for 1 year, they've come back the last 3 years because it's been that warm, meaning we haven't had any snow. So I think what you've got to do is, what do they say, turn your PJs inside out and
Knock on
hope
wood.
for the best.
Yeah.
If you want snow, because I mean, hey, I think that's the thing there. We got to get it.
Yeah, we really got to get snow. Definitely.
And I will say, and I'm so glad a student brought that up, Hannah. So let's talk for a moment about life after COVID-19, right? So prior to COVID-19, yes, everybody, or I heard, I never did it. People turn their PJs inside out and do the snow dance. But what you did try it? I did.
It worked a few times. Don't laugh. It works.
There you go. If it worked, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
But those were days that, I mean, the news would go out and take pictures of students out and sledding down the hills and really enjoying the day. And I think coming out of COVID-19, one thing that's really important for all of us to be aware of is, what are the things that we want to hold on to that we're going to remember for the rest of our lives? And that is, how do we create relationships and time spent with friends and others? And I do completely recognize that, snow days was an opportunity presented in which people really couldn't go out and drive. And so you want to go out and enjoy the snow. So I was laughing earlier when I said, we have to get snow, but if we have significant snow in our area, I can just say we will go through the process as we always have. And we feel like this is a day where we cannot have transportation. That's definitely something that we will go through our regular process and declare appropriately based on the amount of snow that we have. So.
Right. I think back on my 13 years now of being an MCPS student, and some of the best memories are those days where I woke up 6:30 a.m. ready to go to school, and I look out the window and it's covered in white, and I know I don't have to go today. So I love that you said that about the memories that we have.
Oh, and look at it, Hannah. Everybody's commenting about where they go sledding.
Oh,
there's been sledding at Robert Frost, sledding at Cabin Branch. So you all are ready.
Yes,
gotta get
they
snow.
are ready. Defrost your sleds. All right. I don't know if this student is being serious, but I did want to elevate this because I think it's a good thing to talk about. If a student has COVID, if they take a test, they figure out they're positive, what are the next steps? What should they be doing?
So if a student tests positive with COVID-19, they, have to quarantine for 10 days. That is the requirement. They have to quarantine for 10 days. And as we've learned about this virus, we know that that's the amount of time in which the experts have said that it's no longer contagious or whatever it may be that contributed to that decision that we follow from the guidance of the CDC in the state. So they have to quarantine for 10 days. I will say that one bit of work that we took very seriously this year, knowing that we were not out of the pandemic, is, for any student who may have to quarantine if they test positive for COVID-19, we have two situations. We may have a student who is very much impacted by the complications or the side effects of COVID-19 and just can't work or can't do anything but care for themselves. And then we also know that we've had students and adults, anyone who may have COVID who may not experience symptoms and can very well just go on with life. But we can't have them come back into the school before those 10 days because we do have to protect the interest of everyone else. However, we do think it's important for them to have all the tools that are necessary for them to be able to continue their education if they are able to function in that way if a student has to be out in quarantine for 10 days. So quarantine is the answer. And then it's always good to test again. And then we welcome you back into school.
And what I really want to stress is that you should tell your school, right? So they can see if you were in close contact with any of your friends or your peers, right? Our schools and our contact tracers can't do that work unless you notify them. So that's very, very important that you or your family or your guardian tells the school about your positive case.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Hannah, for saying that. Again, tonight, I think a theme has been community. And so to keep our community safe, this is a perfect example of why we have to do it because we can act on the information that we have. And when we have the information about if a student is tested positive for COVID-19, then we have the benefit of utilizing that information to protect others. So thank you for raising that.
Yes, definitely. So going back to a few of the pre-submitted questions I have, Abigail from Westland Middle School wants to know what MCPS is doing to help the environment and help combat climate change.
Thank you for that, Abigail. An important question. So we have I must say this is one thing that I'm proud of us in the system for doing, and there's much more to do, but we have a lot of programs around energy conservation in place, recycling. I have seen some of the best recycling projects developed in schools with our students taking the lead and figuring out how that recycling looks and happens in a very productive way within their school buildings. And this year I had a chance to meet with two students from two different schools who were part of a group focusing on how do we better compost in MCPS. And so, those are a few examples of things that we're doing. I just highlight that it's been great that our students have been able to take the lead with many of these efforts to make sure that we are addressing climate change. And of course, this year we are excited to launch our electric buses. Just again, You're right. Another way that we're moving in the right direction as a county, as a school system, to protect our environment. So very excited about that.
Yes, the electric school buses are huge. That's so, so awesome. I don't remember this if this is the exact year, so don't quote me. 2035 for when we'll be fully electric, and that is a huge, huge step towards
Fully electric, yes.
yeah, being carbon neutral. So that's awesome. I also want to say that the Board of Education is working on a new sustainability policy. So the guidelines that our school system will have to follow in order to be green and take steps to really reduce our environmental footprint. So if you're interested in that, DM me, reach out, email me. I can connect you with some people. Cool,
Yeah.
cool. So some students are asking, we're right in the middle of testing season right now. We have MAP tests, MCAP, MISA for some people. I had to take the MISA a few weeks ago. It just feels like a lot of testing. So could you speak to why it's all happening at once right now this year?
Yeah, I certainly can. So earlier, Hannah spoke about how MCPS fits into the context of a smaller body that has to work within the rules and regulations of the state. And so the Maryland State Department of Education, who does provide guidance around the assessments that we have to provide and how often we have to provide those assessments to students, are a very big part of that. And last year, when students were returning to school in the spring, they actually made some adjustments to say that we could put testing off until the fall, which is exactly what we did. But we had to have a window of time in which we had to administer the test. So that's why we are doing it as students come back into the buildings. And one other benefit I will say, and I know it's been a lot, but we were very anxious to have students come in and take part in the assessments, because a big assessments early on in the year, because a big question that we had to be able to answer is, what has been the impact of the pandemic on student learning? And quite frankly, to be very as accurate as we can in the data, if we waited too long to collect that information, then we actually maybe, we wouldn't have a very good sample of how students have been impacted if they've been in school for a while before we started to administer those assessments, because it could be that the educational supports and structures that we put in place as students return back this fall could very well change that data. And so we wanted to be able to answer that question clearly so that we would know exactly what it is that we need to do for our students and in the system as a result of the pandemic. So I hope that does add some context to why the testing window is what it is. We are required to provide assessments by the state and in a certain window of time. But then more importantly, why those assessments are important. Now, with that said, I also want to say that those types of assessments are not the only ones that we have to focus on. We also know that it's important for us to collect data on how you are transitioning back into school, how our students are feeling, all of those things that are important, because it's not just about the number that tells us what we need to do or how we are to be informed about how we're setting up successful structures for you as students in the school building. And so I emphasize that because I know it could possibly feel like that, since many of the assessments that were initially given were more of the learning assessments, but do know that we look forward to being able to collect that qualitative data on how you feel and how things are working for you as well.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned the impact of virtual learning on students. I think this is something that students don't often think about, but COVID impacted all of us, and it impacted some of us more than others. Just the other day at a Board of Education meeting, a public meeting, we were looking at the data of different measures, and we saw that COVID-19 and virtual learning really specifically impacted Black students, Hispanic and Latino students, and farm students. And so it's this kind of information that the school system really needs to be looking at to understand where we need to put our resources. We've gotten a lot of extra money from the federal government. Where should that be going in order to best serve our student body? Where's the greatest need? So that is one of the reasons. Quickly, before we wrap up, I did just want to quickly address, I saw some comments about the vaccine mandate and medical exceptions. You can apply for a medical exception, and vaccines are only mandated for, well, first of all staff, but then also students who want to participate in winter or spring sports. I don't know, Dr. McKnight, if you wanted to quickly add anything to that.
Yes, no, that is correct. So theme, community. And I know that everyone, may have different opinions about the vaccine, but when we really look at our sports, many of our sports are very high contact. And so when we talk about a team effort, whether you're playing a game or a sport, you're depending on one another. Well, in this case, we really have to depend on one another to be safe, so that we can still enjoy the pleasure of participating in extracurricular activities and sports and those things. So this is about, as a team, they often say nothing in team, there's no I in team. Same analogy here. This is about looking out for the interests of all who are participating in the sport. So we do require that for our student athletes. And we're looking forward to the vaccine for our younger students that will be coming up, because again, I think everything that we can do in our school system in our county to get vaccinated to keep all of us safe and healthy, so that we can all be rid of COVID-19. I saw a comment in there about not wanting to wear a mask. Well, then we all have to do something to help us get to that point where we don't have to do that.
Yes.
Although I will be wearing a mask, I believe, in the grocery store from here on in.
And the airplane.
And the airplane, exactly.
Yes.
But I do think that it's important for us all to remember we have a responsibility to mitigate the impact of this environment. I mean, of this pandemic, or this COVID-19 virus. And so as we do that, we have to think about how our decisions are impacting others. So I just ask everyone to reflect on that and know that this is about the greater good for the community.
Yes, it is. Keeps coming back to that theme of community time and time and time again, which I think is so fitting for being back in person for the first time in 18 months. But we have 3 minutes, Dr. McKnight. I don't know if you have any closing words, final thoughts for our students who stayed on until the very end, because I do see that there are some of you who stayed for this whole hour. So thank you.
Yes, I even see one of our principals from
Blair.
From Blair High School. Hi there. So again, it's great that everyone decided to come and spend this time with us this evening. It was a great conversation. If I could title our conversation for tonight, it would say we're in this together, because I feel like that's been the theme of every single topic that we've discussed, from coming out with a better alternative, the cool math games, to what do we need to do in our community to make sure we're keeping one another safe. And I truly think as we move forward, as we consider what our part is in MCPS, it always has to go beyond what's individually good for us. So as you think about going back into your schools, and we started this conversation saying, well, how do we all take responsibility for the things that we change in our community? Leave this Graham session tonight thinking, what's the change you want to see in your community? And then what can you do about that? Because we invite you to be a part of that discussion, because that's the only way that we're going to become better than ever in Montgomery County Public Schools. And we have to do that together. And your voices as students have to be elevated in that process. I thank you for participating in this session tonight. I look forward to the next one. We clearly have lots more to discuss.
I know.
And thank you, Hannah, for having the vision to host this discussion and for inviting me here this evening. I love all of our students, and I want to thank you for everything that you do to that add to our school system being a great school system in Montgomery County Public Schools. There's much more to be done. But there is, and we might get cut off in these last 30 seconds here, but thank you everyone for joining. We hope that we can do more of these in the future to talk about lunches and vaccines and all those other issues that I saw in the comments that we just didn't have time for. But thank you so much, Dr. McKnight. I know you have an incredibly busy schedule, so speaking to students certainly means a lot. And students, if you ever have any other concerns, this is not the only forum to do so. You can email me or Dr. McKnight or the board, or show up to our meetings. So yeah. We'll look for you.
Yes, we will. We will. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Good night. Take care.
Bye.